Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, I am looking at some paintings from a Ron Ranson book. I'm looking at the Big Brush Watercolor, and I'm looking at page 39, a Main Harbor Scene. In a previous video from a few moments ago, I did the sketch with a flat brush, or just a tonal value, to kind of get an idea of where we had our darks and to look at the curvature that was taking place. Then I had an attempt at looking at what he did, not at the scene that he had painted, because he had the photo of the original scene. And I learned a few things right away, and I'm going to mention those before I jump into the next. That to isolate the whites of the paper with no wet washes and watch for those crisp marks. I'm not sure if Ron had used a pencil to mark those spaces out or not. I know that Frankie Clark would use generalized pencil areas to map things out. I put out fresh pigment for raw sienna, ultramarine, Payne's gray, burnt umber, and I didn't put out fresh pigment for lamp black, light red oxide, because that one just works good enough for me with that. But being straight from the tube is the other important thing. The third thing that popped up, I'm not quite sure, but I'll just leave it at those two, and as they come across, I'll work with it. So, putting out the fresh paint. I'm going to look at this distant line. I'm going to use raw umber, raw sienna, sorry. And the way it diffuses, I'm not sure if he had wet that area around it. And if you watch this channel a lot, you know that I do a lot of wet and wet completely. But I can't completely cover my paper in water because of some of these edges that I want to preserve, like the front of, I'm just going to refer to this as a boathouse. Also want to add the different working just in this fashion, putting these wet piles down is very different for me, and controlling the tonal value. I think that this is an area without fiddling would be difficult, and it'd be hard to kind of really keep things going. Okay, this comes in here, my dock's in this region. Just going for some pure raw sienna in this for this landmass coming out behind the dock. My dock is going to be about here, my foreground dock. I'm going to take this, swoosh it around, catch that dry brush effect. Now in here, I'm going with just using Payne's gray, and I'll mix in some burnt umber for that dock. And we have the light mass sitting around here. In fact, from his photograph, it was a very foggy scene. And the whites that you see in these locations are not in the scene at all. Like there's no way that those are white of the paper in real life. So that must mean that Ron looked for the lightest value and then decided that that should be his white. That's what I'm thinking. There's wet in here for the reflections. So I'm just feeding into that wet. And the bluer aspect of the water comes down around and catches that edge here. Now you can see in this spot he wets his brush and he uses it to pull out or scrub out essentially right in this spot. I'll just do that there and there. And I want to strengthen this foreground. So I mentioned that I'm doing these on the backs of paintings. Over time you're going to amass tons of paintings, and not every one of them is going to be a winner, but they're going to be learning experiences. It looks like he hardened that line there and brought it down. Then on the side right here was a burnt umber, probably a little bit of Payne's gray in it. I think I put too much in, but I'm cool with that. Need more water in this mix. He left that white right there. That's probably too much fiddling to begin with on my part. He puts in the door of the boathouse, right about there. Now in this book, tool-wise, he recommends the Hake, the number 3 rigger, and a flat. So I'm thinking that I could use rigger in these locations, but since this is a newer Hake brush, I figured I would just use it on these experiments to kind of wear it in to where I like it for my painting style. But that being said, a flat, a number 3 rigger, and the Hake is what he recommends. Okay, so this guy is super dark in the foreground, and it's on half a page. It kind of carries over onto the page alongside it, this photo, the painting, which makes it a little difficult for me to kind of see exactly what's going on. But the general idea is that he has the upright pillar on both sides, so you kind of see just the top of the far side. You'll see our closer side here. Compositionally, he talks about the curve in this little paragraph, but I don't know if he really talked about this dock placement, but the dock placement really helps bring the eye into the scene and into the curve. So we see that through. We see parts of the wood holding the pilings together. I think he might have actually scraped these out. So let me get looser. There's wet and wet down here, but I'll leave it like that. And I have a scraping tool that Mr. Mark made me. I put it in here somewhere. I've been just moving stuff around. I'm always moving stuff around. So scrape here, scrape here, scrape here. I'm not trying to overdo it. I'm just kind of removing the pigment to catch those pilings. It could have been definitely darker there. I'm seeing a little bit of scratch work in here, but we might be beyond that point. And we do have a boat that's right in here, so I'm just going to put a little boat out. This is where you'd want to use the rigger or the flat. I'm just kind of putting it in. I think he even left a little white right above it to help it sit in place. Alright, I'm going to pause the camera. Let's do a dry off, even though only a few areas are wet, and we'll kind of talk about it. Alright, so this really does look like a traditional watercolor painting with the fast and loose, with using the whites of the paper and isolating that. I'm going to try to stick to what I think he does rather than what I think I would do or how I would adjust it for myself. Compared to the previous attempt a few moments ago when I didn't have fresh pigment, you can see how the fresh pigment definitely made a difference. The control of the white of the paper definitely makes that difference there. Cleaner initial edges, I believe, would be quite helpful, and that would be just control of the brush and the pigment load in the water. The sweeping dry brush effect, I know I passed over it a few times, and as you pass over it a few more times, you're just going to lose that the scintillation, the sparkle that takes place. So I kind of started losing that. So the scraping here, very limited, but got the job done. The photo in the book, the painting looks darker in the areas, but the initial value study showed me that these two were very similar, so that helped out. And compositionally, it comes in and leads the eye in around to the spot, so it brings it back into the scene. And you can probably even argue that the white here and then going back is more S-shaped composition as well. Those hard edges, even though I had a lot of water on the brush, really helped create that spot. I know I said I'd avoid saying what I would do, but I'd probably wet up here and just let everything kind of diffuse up. Using fresh ultramarine, it came out darker than it does in the picture. This is more true to probably what this should have been. Using the hake on its side, sharp enough to get some lines, but this bled out and didn't get as dark as it should be. In fact, we'll just grab some Payne's Gray on the hake brush. I could probably even put a few more marks in. I should have, I guess debating back and forth whether should I have let myself use the rigger or not, or the flat as well for those type of areas. The rigger will help, the hake will help with the looseness. The rigger could maybe cause me to be tighter. So I just wanted to kind of go pure rigger on it. On that note, we'll leave it at that. I hope you found this interesting, and it encourages you to look at the Ron Ranson books and look at the Ron Ranson Disciple Facebook page. On that note, have a great day. Y'all take care. Bye.